At this time, I'd like to introduce Patty Moynihan, the Executive Director of National RTAP.
Thank you, Rob, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this first session in our new 101 webinar series. Just to give you a little background about the series, we've heard during our outreach many times that people find webinars to be a convenient, cost-effective way to get information. And in our recent survey of state RTAP managers, there was a suggestion for a series of webinars that would present basic information on a variety of topics that people could attend and then show later to other staff members. So our series is our response to that feedback, and we're planning to do a 101 webinar every other month, and our topics will include things like charter regulations, MAP 21 safety and asset management requirements, drug and alcohol testing, and others. But if you have a suggestion or a request, please feel free to send us an email or give us a call, and we'd love to hear what you would like to hear about. Next slide, please, Rob. Now, the topic today, social media, the timing is perfect for this because here at National RTAP, we recently completed our own social media plan, and we chose Facebook as the best platform for us to get started in the social media world. So beginning today, you can find us at facebook.com/nationalrtap, and we hope that you visit that page often and enjoy it and let us know what you think. Now, before I introduce our presenter today, we'd like to ask you a couple of questions just so we can get a sense of how our audience is using social media today. So I'll ask Rob to launch that poll.
Okay, Patty, the poll is launched. Please just click on your answers to this question. We'll give people about a minute in order to do that. We will be asking 2 questions. Okay, we'll keep it open for another couple of seconds. Okay, we'll close the poll. At this time, 67% use Facebook, 20% use Twitter, 32% use YouTube, 20% use other. If you use other social media, if you'd like, you can type it into the questions just to give us an idea of what the other is. And then 24% do not use it. Okay, I'm going to close that poll, and we'll move on to the next poll. Okay, if you can, this has to do with using social media in your organization. And just keep it open for another couple of seconds. Okay, we're going to close the poll. According to your response, 46% use Facebook, 24% use Twitter, 11% use YouTube, and 24% use LinkedIn. 43% of the respondents don't use social media as part of their organization. Okay, I'm going to close the poll, and Patty, back to you.
Okay, great, thanks. We're very pleased to have Susan Bregman here with us today. Susan is the principal and founder of Oak Square Resources, which is a Boston-based consulting firm, and she has more than 25 years of experience as a transportation researcher and policy analyst. Prior to founding Oak Square Resources, she was a senior associate at Multisystems, which is now Transsystems, and she also worked for the City of Boston and USDOT. And Susan is an expert on social media. She was the principal investigator for TCRP Synthesis 99, which looked at the uses of social media in public transportation across the country. And for the past 5 years, she's been editor of the Transit Wire, which is a daily blog about transit technology that covers everything from smart cards to social media. Susan recently teamed with a colleague to edit a book called Best Practices for Transportation Agency Use of Social Media, which will be published very shortly, and I think Susan will tell you a little bit more about that later. So with that, I'd like to welcome Susan and turn the presentation over to her.
Thank you, Patty. I have to show my screen. Okay, how's that? Thank you, Patty. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I am looking forward to talking about Social Media 101. I'm going to talk about 6 basic things today. I just want to give a very brief overview of social media. This isn't a how to set up a Facebook account kind of Social Media 101. I'm assuming some basic level of familiarity with social media. And then I want to talk a little bit about what types of social media are out there, especially the most popular ones, and talk a little about how transit operators use social media. I have a number of examples so you can see how your colleagues are using Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And then I want to take a few minutes to talk about the digital divide, the distinction between people who have access to technology and people who do not, and how that affects use of social media in the transportation world. And then start talking about what you can do, how you can get started, and how you can ensure a successful launch or improvements to your social media presence. And then highlight a few concerns that I know transportation operators have, and then and then wrap it up. What does this message on my screen mean? Okay, so let me first talk about what social media is. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the basics of social media, and I just want to compare it to traditional media, like sending out a press release. With traditional media, the information is generated by your agency. It's static. What you send out is what people receive, and they can't change it in any way. The messaging is one way. You are sending it out to your public, to reporters, to your riders, to whoever your intended audience is. It is in your voice, and you are sending out information. For social media, it's a whole, social media is more of a conversation. The information, much of it is generated by users through their comments. It is interactive in that way because people do have the opportunity to comment on information and to share information. Okay. And this leads to multiple voices. Many people are reading your social media posts and they're commenting on it. It is not just the agency who is presenting the information anymore. And ultimately what you are trying to achieve is engagement with your riders, with your constituents, with your stakeholders, to have a conversation and develop these relationships with people who are your social media followers. So there's a number of types of social media, and it keeps, it keeps changing. And the social media landscape that was out there a year ago is not the social media landscape that's available today, and it's not the social media landscape that we'll probably see next year or next month. But as a general typology, I define 6 basic types of social media. Networking, social networking is probably the one that most people are familiar with. That's things like Facebook, LinkedIn, Google+, which is trying to be another version of Facebook, as I'm sure you know, and GovLoop, which is one of those specialized social networks that, in this case, is for government employees. Microblogging is a term that people use to describe applications like Twitter, where the messages are very short. Twitter is limited to 140 characters, including spaces. So it's very short. You have to be very focused when you send out a message on Twitter. Tumblr is similar. It's a microblogging platform where people mostly post photos and very brief quotes, very brief information. They're not expounding at length about things. Instagram, the same things, where people are uploading photos from their cell phones and maybe commenting on them a little bit. Another big group, very popular group of social media applications are the media sharing applications. YouTube, certainly one of the most popular social media platforms in the world, where people upload, share, and watch videos. Vimeo is very similar to YouTube in that regard. Flickr, where people share photographs, and Scribd and SlideShare, I believe, also are applications where people share documents, PDFs, PowerPoint presentations, and that sort of thing. Other types of social media platforms include blogs, which can be on any number of platforms. I often use WordPress for my blogs. The Transit Wire is on WordPress. Social curation sites are a fairly new phenomenon in the world of social media, and that's where things like Pinterest and Storify come in. Pinterest is an application where people can share mostly photos, but anything they find online, and organize them in storyboards, on bulletin boards, and around different themes. And on a personal level, people use them often to share recipes or decorating tips, but there are ways to use them professionally as well. Storify, also a very cool application that I like a lot, that lets you create narratives using social media posts that other people have put on a little theme. Like I did a Storify story a year ago about the impacts of Hurricane Sandy, and I was able to pull information from Facebook, from Twitter, from Flickr, and really show how transit agencies responded to the hurricane a year ago. There are other types of social media platforms as well. Crowdsourcing, some people consider it social media. It's where people have an opportunity to comment on a topic or a theme or answer a question, maybe about long-range planning, and other people will vote on their responses, and eventually through consensus and votes and popularity of different ideas, the best ideas will usually bubble to the top. Geolocation applications are also considered a form of social media. The most commonly known one is Foursquare, and this is an application where people can check in the words of the application, to a specific location and share that information with their social network. And then you also get virtual points or virtual prizes for checking into those locations. And finally, even things like Groupon and Living Social are considered social media because they have a social component where they ask people to share in the deal that people are buying. So that's just an overview of social media, but there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different social media platforms out there. So why should you use social media? Why do any transit operators use social media? In a nutshell, they use it to inform, to connect, and have fun. And I have some examples here. So for transit operators in particular, using social media to provide service updates is a very important use of the tool and a very common use of the tool. Twitter in particular is very well suited for real-time updates and for very short updates so people know that the bus is late, a route is diverted, a street is closed. Facebook is also a good app for doing that, but Twitter is really where people use for real-time information especially. It's also helpful to provide general agency information on social media, whether you've started a program with your library like this operator here, or you're providing a service to a festival or a local event like here where the Charlevoix County Transit is promoting a downtown festival and letting people know that they can take the bus to the festival. Another common use of social media is to promote your own agency. When something good happens, when you get an award, when you were recognized in some way for doing something great, or you receive a grant, whatever it is, agencies often use social media to just brag a little bit about themselves and let people know what's going on and spread some good news about transit. And then there is engagement with riders, where transit agencies like to use social media just to talk with their riders, just to have a conversation. Here, just about the weather, just more rain, more cold, yuck. It's not a big, profound comment, but it gets some comments, it gets people talking, and it gets people thinking about the people behind the agency, that there are actual people there, that the agency is not just some bureaucracy, that it's humanized a little bit. And in the same vein, agencies often use social media to connect with their communities. Here, you know, this agency provided a downtown trolley tour and took pictures of everybody and then posted them on Facebook for everyone to share, so everyone could participate and celebrate the activity and then share it with their friends. Some agencies use social media to ask for support. Caltran here, the Kalispell Tribal Transit operator, used Facebook to ask its riders for letters of support when it was going for grant applications. And some agencies use polls. They use Facebook, they use Twitter to poll their riders. You can ask them about, you know, service changes, long-range planning. This operator here was asking riders if they liked their drivers' new uniforms. So you can really pretty much ask about anything. And they got a lot of comments. Another way agencies use social media is to appreciate their drivers and also to recruit new ones. Post job listings and let people know that the agency is hiring. A fun use of social media is to have sweepstakes and contests. You can have giveaways. This is a Facebook contest. It's probably a third-party plugin that lets them do this, but it's a use of Facebook to create buzz about the agency, get its riders excited, and celebrate 35 years of service. And then finally, agencies just like using YouTube in this case to have a little fun, promote their service, create little video vignettes, and encourage people to ride their service. So those are some examples of how transit agencies are using social media these days. And now I want to take a little diversion and talk about the digital divide, the difference between people who have access to technology and people who don't. I'm sure a lot of you are thinking that your riders don't use social media. So let me talk about who is using social media and who isn't. There's a little bit of good news here and a little bit of bad news. So first, the good news. Almost all Americans are on the internet these days. These are numbers from 2012. 81% of U.S. adults are online. Now, the not so good news is that some of your riders are probably in the 19% who are not online. 47% of seniors don't use the internet, 33% of low-income households, almost half of people with no high school diploma, and 46% of people with disabilities. So this is who's not online right now. The good news is that use of internet is growing, has been growing. It has grown 30 percentage points from 2000 to 2012, from 50% internet adoption in 2000, these are all numbers for the U.S., to 81% in 2012. So it looks like the trend is going to continue upward, and internet use is still increasing. And along with internet use, broadband availability is also increasing. And in 2012, most people had broadband access. And by broadband, I mean cable, DSL, and fiber optic access, not dial-up. So let me take a look also at who's using social media. And I want to talk just about Facebook. Every platform is a little different, but since Facebook is by far the most popular social media platform in the world. I want to talk about that a little bit. Here you can see the breakdown of Facebook users by age in 2012. And there are not a lot of surprises here. It's to be expected that nearly all young adults, 18 to 29, are using Facebook. More than half of baby boomers are using Facebook, and 1 out of 3 seniors is also using Facebook. So these numbers are encouraging, and what's also encouraging is that as baby boomers age into the next cohort, the number of seniors who are using social media is likely to increase as well. So social media use is going to keep going up. There's some correlation with household income, but again, I think the picture here is that 3 out of 5 adults in every income category who are online are using Facebook. So there's high usage in all categories. And the same with urban settings. Certainly, city residents are more likely to use Facebook than their rural counterparts. But again, use is high. The majority of people who are already online in all these categories are using Facebook. So even if some of your riders aren't using Facebook today, aren't using social media today, or even if you aren't using social media today, it's likely that more people will be using these platforms next year and the year after that, and the year after that. It's just a phenomenon that keeps growing. So now I'd like to talk about some of the things to think about when you start using social media. One of the first things that a lot of organizations like to do is set up a social media policy. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be a huge stack of papers. And some agencies just add some extra clauses to an existing personnel policy. But what social media policies can help an agency do is establish some protocols and some practices. And some of the common things that organizations include in social media policies are identifying who's responsible for posting content, what kind of approvals are needed in the agency before you can post content, who in the agency is authorized to access social media. Can workers visit Facebook on company time? Are any channels blocked? I know a lot of organizations block YouTube, Facebook, and other social media channels. Social media policies also can define what kind of uses are acceptable. They can advise their employees to be respectful when they're commenting on social media posts, to protect the privacy of users. Social media policies also can let employees know how they should identify themselves when they are online, either when they're acting on behalf of the agency or when they are using their personal accounts, because the line, as I'm sure everyone knows, is blurring between work and personal use of social media. And finally, a lot of social media policies also talk about agency administrative issues, IT issues like protecting cybersecurity, password control, record-keeping requirements, and a lot of the housekeeping elements of social media that agencies have to think about. Oops. One of the first things that organizations should think about when they're using social media is what are their goals and what platform is the appropriate platform to use for achieving those goals. This is really important. A lot of people just use Facebook because they've heard of Facebook, they know Facebook, their kids use Facebook, but they don't know whether Facebook is perhaps the right or the wrong platform to use for what they're trying to do. So here I've just identified 4 common platforms and some of the best matches of use for those platforms. So Twitter is great for short and sweet little nuggets of information. As I said before, it's very constrained in how long your tweets can be, so it's perfect for things like RTAP 22 is delayed. It's not great for big think pieces. Blogs are what you would use if you want a longer post to provide more background information. Facebook is a really good platform for both posting information and engaging writers and engaging your community in conversation. It's very easy for people to comment on Facebook. Many people are on Facebook, and it's a good platform for creating connections with your writers. Platforms like Flickr and YouTube, to some extent, are also really good for sharing information about your system, sharing visual assets. Flickr is good for sharing photos of community events, of your vehicles, of your facilities, and some agencies use Flickr almost as a way to distribute press releases. They post photographs of an event or an activity or a new hydrogen bus or whatever they're trying to promote. They'll post those photos on Flickr with a long caption, and the media representatives can just pull that information and put it in their publications. Finding your voice is another really important element of a successful social media campaign. And I'm talking about two things here. First, deciding who in your agency will be speaking on behalf of the organization. In a big agency, it's often the marketing or communications department or possibly the customer service staff. In small operations, it could be the general manager. It depends on the agency. It's an individual decision, but it's really important to know this in advance. The second aspect of finding your voice is finding what tone you want to use. Social media is a conversation, and people want to know that they're talking to a human being. But agencies have different personalities, and some agencies are very serious, some agencies are playful, some agencies are kind of sarcastic and snarky when they communicate with people, and you want your social media voice, the tone of your social media posts, to extend the identity of your agency, so all your messaging is consistent, and so people who interact with you on social media really feel that they understand your agency and they know your agency and they can relate to your organization. And then you want to think about your audience. You want to know, who are you talking to? Who are you trying to reach with social media? What do they need to know? What do you want them to know? Are you trying to talk to commuters during rush hour? Are you talking to people who are using your service to get to medical appointments? Who are you trying to talk to, and what do they want to know? Because this is the kind of information that will inform your content. Ultimately, you need to develop engaging content because that's what people will keep coming back for. And once you define your voice, once you identify the correct social media platform, and once you know who your audience is, then you can start creating engaging content. And it's not easy. It can be a little intimidating sometimes. And most transportation agencies try to find a balance between informative posts and lighthearted posts. But it's going to vary from agency to agency, and the most important thing is to match what you're trying to say with the people you're trying to reach. And ultimately, you want information to be interesting, timely, and to connect with your community. And timing is important. And again, once you have your content, you need to know when to send it out. You want to know how often you should be posting things. You don't want to overpost. You don't want to overwhelm people with information. But you also don't want to have a Facebook page where your last post was 6 months old. You want to have current information. And you also want to know when to send it out. Maybe focus your service alerts. Realistically, your service alerts will be focused probably during the hours when most people are traveling, so maybe during your peak periods. But your marketing-related posts, maybe those could happen midday when there aren't a lot of travelers on the road. And customer engagement, you may want to focus on all day long, because when customers have a question, they need to be answered. Some tools let you schedule your posts in advance, and this can be a great help for agencies. When I do TransitWire, when I write posts for TransitWire, I write them the night before, and I schedule them to be published the next morning. It's also possible to do that with Twitter, with some of these, some third-party applications. So that's a big help for choosing the timing. But overall, I would say the most important lesson is to keep your content fresh. People expect frequent updates, and if the information they see is old, they're probably going to leave and not bother coming back. The other important thing is to let people know where you are. Help people find you. You can have the best Facebook page in the world, but if no one knows where it is, they can't connect with you, and they can't connect with your information. So probably the best way to let people know about your social media platforms is to post links on your agency's homepage. You may not have to do it 3 times on the page, but certainly somewhere on the page so that people know. I mean, that's where I go to look when I'm looking for social media links, and I think a lot of people do that as well. And if your agency doesn't have a website, you should talk to the folks at RTAP about setting one up, because you really should have one. You know, transit professionals are pretty used to measuring everything. So I'm going to suggest that you add one more thing to your list. Measuring social media, knowing who is following you and how they're interacting with your page is really important for 2 reasons. First, it will help you get better. It'll give you the feedback you need to know what posts are working, what kind of information is working, what time of day people are reading your posts, and just give you general reader feedback so you know what you're doing that works and what you're doing that can be done better. And the other thing is that having numbers, quantifying your social media activities, can help you make the case within your organization and justify your use of social media, and possibly help you expand your use of social media by making the case that you are engaging your riders through this form of communication. So a lot of times when I talk to agencies about their use of social media, they have a lot of concerns. And sometimes these concerns are barriers for them, and they don't want to use social media because of their fears. So I want to talk a little bit about some of these common concerns and how agencies can address them. So the first concern is what happens if something goes wrong. And you know what? Something is always going to go wrong. But it's not the end of the world. If it's a small thing, if you have a typo in a post or you sent a tweet to the wrong link, just apologize, maybe make a joke about it, and move on. No one's going to remember. Bigger problems, you might have to take a little more, a little more serious action. If someone attacks your agency online or insults your bus drivers, you may have to respond directly to the individuals. And sometimes a lot of agencies have found that by reaching out to their critics, by engaging them, by saying, saying, hey, what's going on? What's your problem? Can I help you? Here's my email address. Why don't we talk about it? Sometimes agencies have found that that's all it takes, that this disarms their critics, and it turns them into fans because really they were just trying to get some attention. So sometimes that's all you need to do is reach out to people who are insulting you and not ignore them. Another common concern is that you won't be able to control the conversation. And you won't. What you can control is what you say, the information that you send out. But you can't control what people say about your agency. It's certainly appropriate to manage offensive behavior, illegal behavior, and a lot of agencies have information on their Facebook pages or on their Twitter accounts or on their blogs that do tell people what is acceptable and what is not. And these agencies will take down posts that are offensive. But social media is like free market research, and agencies that are thick-skinned about it and are willing to read through what may be some pretty critical stuff in the social world can use social media to learn about their riders, learn about their service, figure out where their problems are, and sometimes even find out about, great drivers, drivers who excel in customer service, and then turn around and reward those drivers. There's a lot of information out there. You can search on your agency's name and see what people are saying about you, and it's really a goldmine of information for agencies. And the bottom line is people are talking about you anyway. They were talking about you before you got on social media. They're probably talking about you now, and you're better off joining the conversation. It's better to have a voice at the table than to let people speak for you. Now, resource requirements is another concern of agencies, and it's an absolutely legitimate concern. Small agencies in particular, with limited staffing, it's a challenge for them. And there are a couple of strategies that can help. One is to limit the hours when you're staffing your social media accounts. Contrary to popular belief, you don't have to be online 24/7. Even the New York Metropolitan Transportation Authority, which provides service 24/7, does not staff its Facebook page or its Twitter accounts around the clock. Agencies can legitimately say, we will be available from 8 to 4, Monday through Friday. But the important thing is, if you're doing that, let people know and give them an alternative place to get information, whether it's a phone call or a website. Another thing to do, and I talked about this briefly before, is to schedule your tweets in advance. Obviously, you can't do this about real-time information, but when you know an event is coming up or you just have general marketing information you want to share, you can easily write those posts when it's convenient and schedule them to go live when you want them to. And then finally, some agencies use interns for their social media activities. Not every agency feels comfortable doing this, but and a lot of them won't use interns at all for customer interaction. But for basic things like putting press releases online or writing up agency announcements, interns can really be a helpful resource as well for agencies. Another question agencies have is whether they have to keep records. And the short answer is, it depends. The law hasn't quite kept up with social media yet, and the laws and regulations are different in different localities, in different states, in different counties. But some agencies have begun treating social media posts like email, and they're archiving the information and keeping it, responding to Freedom of Information requests for social media activity, and treating it like any other official agency communication. Other agencies are taking a wait-and-see attitude, so it really depends on your agency and what your legal counsel tells you to do. And finally, a lot of organizations still say that their riders don't use social media. And as I talked about earlier, yes, that's true. Some of your riders probably don't use social media. But what we're seeing is that more and more people use social media, and probably almost 2/3 of your riders are using social media. And if they're not using it today, they're probably going to be using it a year from now. And the other thing to remember is social media is not the only communications tool in your toolbox. It is one tool. It has some very specific advantages, but it's not going to reach everybody, and it probably never will. But it's there for certain uses, and it's there when you need it. So in researching my TCRP synthesis and the book, I talked to a lot of transportation agencies about their use of social media and asked them what advice they would offer to their colleagues. And many of them said, keep social media in perspective. Like I just said, it's not the only tool available to you. It does certain things really well, but it's probably never going to replace putting flyers on buses. It's probably not going to replace public meetings. It's not going to replace press releases, but it is one really important tool to have available to you. Another thing to remember are the organizational impacts. Find out who in your agency has to approve what you're doing. Does the IT department need to get involved? Does legal need to get involved? Who has to approve your posts, your tweets, what you put up on YouTube? Find that out in advance and save yourself a lot of trouble later. And then, as I talked about earlier, find the right voice. Does your agency want to be serious? Does your agency want to be lighthearted? You know your agency's personality. What you want to do is make your social media voice match your agency's personality. And I think one agency said this to me. You want the tone to be like a cocktail party, not a boardroom. You don't want technology speak. You don't want bureaucracy. You want to have a conversation online. And then just listen. Listen to what your writers are telling you. Read between the lines. Do a little research. Search on your name. See what your reputation is online. And just learn about your agency that way. And remember to have fun. Have some contests. Put some fun videos, put some holiday videos on YouTube, and have a good time with it, because really it's a lot of fun to use. But then just get started. There's no right way to get started using social media. Every agency I spoke to started differently. A lot of them just fell into it. There might have been a hurricane, there might have been a blizzard, and suddenly they found this was the best way to communicate with people. And that's what started them on their social media path. Others took a more measured approach, developed a policy first, and then started tweeting or then opened up a Facebook page. Whatever is right for your agency is right for your agency. And then once you get started, you got to keep moving. 10 years ago, we didn't have Facebook. 10 years from now, I don't know what we're going to have. What I know is that social media has changed the way transportation organizations communicate with their riders, with their constituents, and that is a major, major, major change in transportation communications. So with that, I think that was my last slide.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Right now we have some time for some questions. Susan, I have one that I've sent you. What about RSS subscriptions in place of Twitter?
Okay, I need to figure out how to get to see the screen.
If you click on chat.
Okay, I got it. Well, RSS subscriptions are different than Twitter. Usually what an RSS stands for really simple syndication. And it is a way that people can subscribe to online information. I use it with my blog, with the Transit Wire, where people can subscribe to my RSS feed, as it's called. And that means every time I put a new post on the blog, they will get a little announcement saying that there's a new post. So it's useful for blogs, and the way you access this information is through an RSS aggregator. There used to be something called Google Reader, thank you, but Google discontinued Reader in July. So now there are other similar things, but they're all web-based applications that let you subscribe to one or more RSS feeds, and they just pull them from all different locations and present them to you in one place. So you can subscribe to the Secretary of Transportation's blog, you can subscribe to Transit Wire, You can describe to your local newspapers news headlines as well. But it's different from Twitter. Okay,
Sorry.
I'm going to stop there for a minute. But
Okay. And the next question, and I've sent you that as well. Any ways to count savings on phone calls to customer service or printing schedules using more dynamic social media tools?
Anecdotally, I've heard that people do save on customer service phone calls, but I haven't really seen that quantified. It stands to reason that that could be an outcome, especially if you're able to provide detour information, and especially in conjunction with things like some of those mobile applications that tell people where the bus is, because that's the kind of call that often comes into customer service. But I think the jury is still out right now on how much money people can save. I haven't seen information on that yet.
Okay, thanks, Susan. If people do have questions to ask Susan, just go on to your control panel, click on questions, and you'll be able to type in the questions and send them. Our next question, what is a typical frequency for posting on Facebook for a small transit agency?
Well, as I said before, I think every agency is different. But you want to stay current. You want to have fresh information, but you don't want to drive yourself crazy. I would say maybe 2 or 3 times a week is probably a good frequency for Facebook. You don't want your last post to be from 6 months ago, and I've seen Facebook pages like that. Twitter is different because Twitter really is a real-time service, and whereas with Facebook, posts are sticky on Facebook. When you post something on Facebook, it stays there. You can come back and look at it. Anyone who comes to your Facebook page is going to see the most recent post you put up there, and it'll stay there. Twitter is more like a feed of information, and if you send out a tweet this morning and you want to find it again the next morning, you're going to have a hard time finding it because so many people have sent out tweets in between. So Twitter, what I'm trying to say, let me back up. What I'm trying to say is you probably want to post more often on Twitter than you would on Facebook.
Okay, Susan. Next question, have you seen a difference between urban and rural users of social media? What has more of an impact?
Well, I certainly see a difference in the use of social media between urban and rural users. Urban agencies tend to have more resources, so they tend to be able to put more time and people on their social media activities. Rural agencies sometimes have fewer people and can't devote as much time or money, staff time to using social media. In terms of impact, I don't know that there's a difference. I think each agency's riders appreciate the information they get through social media. I don't know if there'd be a difference between rural and urban transportation customers in their use of social media.
Should we like or follow other organizations in addition to posting our own information?
Yes. You mean on Facebook, I assume?
Yes.
Well, yeah. On Facebook, Facebook is very social. It's very interactive. You want to like and follow other organizations because by doing so, you will receive you will see the posts that they share on their own Facebook pages. So it provides more information to you. You can see what your fellow agencies, what your peers are doing, how they're using social media, and you can share information with them. So it's a good practice generally to reach out to as many organizations as possible. In terms of Twitter, again, the practice in Twitter is to follow the Twitter accounts, the tweets of other people on Twitter. And again, you learn a lot, you get a lot of information from other agencies, and it can be really an informative tool.
Okay, Susan, I have one last question, but before I ask you this, if you want to fix your screen so that your the presentation's up there, this final question, did you see a rider increase after you started using social media? I'll repeat it.
Yes, say that again. Did I see?
Did you? Well, or do you see? I mean, they asked, do you see a rider increase after you started using social media? I suppose generally within the industry.
Yeah. You know, that's a really good question. I don't know that I've seen that kind of information documented. I've seen attempts to document ridership increases based on the availability of real-time information. So to the extent that people use Twitter to do that, I think there's a sense that there's a ridership increase, but the research is only at the beginning stage for that. I think a lot of people just feel that social media creates a more engaged community and improves customer satisfaction and creates happier riders. I don't know that people have quantified a ridership change because of social media.
Okay. Well, if you want to show your closing slide.
Oh, sure. There it is. Thank you. Well, this is how to contact me. As Patty said, I am a consultant. My company's called Oak Square Resources. But what I really want to talk about today is my forthcoming book. It's being released next Friday, and it's called Best Practices for Transportation. I can't even say it. Transportation Agency Use of Social Media. And it's not a how-to book, but what it is it's a collection of chapters that talk about different aspects of social media, written by practitioners, written by transit agencies, written by academic researchers, and really a lot of people who have hands-on experience with social media. And there's interviews that I conducted with social media practitioners in transit, a couple of DOTs, and an airport. And really, so you get a lot of first-person information about how people use social media. And it's on Amazon.com. So thank you, Rob.
Okay. What I'm doing right now, for those of you that are listening, is I'm just moving screens over to my side, and then we're bringing Patty back on. Patty?
Thanks, Rob. Before we let you go today, first of all, I want to thank Susan. I think that was a great presentation, and I took a lot of notes. I know I learned a few things that I didn't know about social media. Before we end the webinar, though, we'd like to ask you one more question to see if there's interest in doing a social media 102 webinar at some point in the future. So I'll let Rob put that question up.
Hold on. I'm sorry that you're seeing more than you should be right at the moment, but hold on. Okay, you should be seeing this question.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to leave it open. I'm sorry that you're seeing other things possibly.
We'd like to know if there's any interest in doing a follow-up webinar that would talk about either how to use specific platforms or how to use social marketing for specific purposes, or to hear more from transit agency practitioners that have been using social media. So if you could just take a second and answer that question, we'd find that information very useful.
Patty, while we're doing this, and I'm sorry that the audience has to hear this, Susan, if you can click that you're allowing it to change back to me, that would be great.
We already did that.
We did, oh.
Okay.
I believe we did that. Is it
I'm
still
not
showing
getting,
the screen?
Where would it
Okay,
be?
now we're all set. We're all set.
Okay.
Thank you, and I'm sorry, the audience. Okay, for that particular survey, let me show the results. 76% said that they would how to use specific platforms like Facebook. 86% how to use this for specific purposes, that is, like marketing. And they would like to hear from practitioners who use social media, 63%.
Okay, great. That's really good information for us. So we may be planning a follow-up webinar at some point in the future. So with this, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank Susan again for her presentation. And everybody have a great afternoon, and we'll look forward to seeing you in November at our next 101 webinar. Thank you.
Patty, if I can just, before people hang up, we will have the webinar available on our website, www.nationalrtap.org, probably within a week. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Goodbye, everybody.